Serious, what is your I was that close to dying moment? What I remember, I'm 11 years old. Playing outside. And it starts to rain. I wake up in the hospital 3 days later. What happened? Lightning struck the ground next to me. I was knocked unconscious. Thrown into the air. My heart stopped. Paramedics used CPR and a defibrillator to bring me back. I'm all grown up now, with the only long-term effect being I have no memories of that summer before being struck. Which kind of sucks because that was the summer we went to Disneyland. Friend was driving me to Taco Bell. Was at a median trying to make a left turn. Friend gets distracted by phone. And takes foot off brake. Car coming from other direction sees us rolling and swerves at the last second to avoid crashing into my side at 50 miles per hour. Friend realizes he's in the middle of road and guns it into parking lot. I don't know what I did to deserve to be that lucky. But I'm somehow still alive. Was a theater tech in high school. One of the techs was showing the new girl how to use the fly system, a hanging pipe that you hang things on. Clouds. Airplane. etc. When you bring the fly down. You yell fly down and everyone who hears it echoes it. So everyone quickly knows it's coming down. You also drop it slowly. Well. I was working center stage. Right under the fly. She didn't say fly down until she had already dropped it. And she just let it fall really fast until it was hip height from the ground. If I would have stepped forward or back, instead of right, I would be dead. Luckily I stepped right and just stared at her. She knew. A car almost drove me over intentionally when I was cycling. I sprinted out of there as fast as possible, and to this day I have no idea why he did it. The 5th of October 2019 I was rear-ended by a dump truck. In a coma for 42 days and now I can't walk. I'm immunosuppressed and breathing is compromised, so who knows what the future holds. Life is good people, so enjoy every day. Person I was driving with fell asleep at the wheel on the highway. I grabbed the wheel. Can't remember much about the moment at all now. Full 360ed across 3 lanes and somehow made it over safely into the median without hitting anyone or being hit. So lucky. I was 8 years old and it was midsummer and it felt great out in the mornings. So I decided to go do kid stuff outside. I started climbing a tree in my front yard up to the point I had always gone to. But for some reason that day I decided to go as high as I possibly could. The tree was on a part of my lawn past the sidewalk and against the street. And at this point I'm 25 feet above the pavement. I go to grab a branch that was too brittle and fall all 25 feet onto the concrete. Snapping my left wrist, CF. Getting holes and tears on my lungs. And rupturing my spleen. Before I went into surgery, keep in mind I was 8. I overheard the doctor tell my parents they didn't think I'd survive through the surgery. One of the scariest things a kid could possibly hear. Almost 10 years ago I was suffering from stomach pain. At the time I was drinking vodka daily and didn't have any direction in my life. I was still living at home and it finally came to the point where it was obvious that the drinking wasn't the problem. I went to the hospital and was diagnosed with diverticulitis. I waited so long to be treated that I was as pale as a ghost and required emergency surgery to correct the problem. After all that happened I took better care of myself, but just recently I was taken to the hospital again for severe stomach pains. I required emergency surgery again to correct a hernia that formed and was cutting off blood to my lower intestines. I had to have more of my lower intestines removed to get rid of all the dead tissue. Both experiences were terrible and I felt like I was on my deathbed for both of them. I ran across the road as a kid without looking. It turns out there's a reason they tell you not to do that. A van had been driving round the corner. Slammed on the brakes. Only stopped a few inches away from me. I waved and carried on across the road. I must have given the poor driver a heart attack. So, when I was about 6, I was at a pool with my mom. aunt and entitled cousin. He wanted to swim on an inflatable alligator I was on. So he just pushed me off it and I was there, drowning at the bottom of the pool. He didn't give a flying frick about me dying down there. Thank God. My aunt noticed I was gone and that bubbles coming out from water. She then realized what was going on and saved me. Fun fact, my cousin didn't even get grounded for that. Doing some electrical work with my dad, who is a licensed electrician. Reached into an open box that had some tools I set in the bottom without looking and nearly grounded myself on a leg of 3-phase 480 volt. I had just moved my left hand from conduit to masonry as I was leaning over. If I hadn't done that I would probably not be here today. Caught in an avalanche and trapped under snow for 6 hours. Side note. What is going on with this post? Everyone's responses are duplicated like 5-time edit. I realize I was super vague. Just didn't have much time earlier. This was about 10 years ago and I have no problem talking about any part of it. So if you have questions, feel free to ask. I was born with a cleft palate, which is a birth defect that can prevent a child from eating and talking properly and can cause the child to starve to death if the birth defect isn't identified and the child isn't given the correct feeding equipment. The doctor on staff to identify my birth defect had left to play golf right before I was born. And the nurses weren't qualified to diagnose me with a cleft palate and give me the proper feeding equipment. I guess the organization at the hospital was horrible, because about 2.5 days after I was born no one had diagnosed me, and thus I had not been fed. Eventually one of the nurses found out what was going on and fed me using the proper equipment. But because she was not qualified to make that decision she was fired. If I had been allowed to starve for just a few more hours, I would have died. That nurse's decision cost her her job but gave me my life. And anytime I'm considering suicide I remember that. Thank you, whoever you are, for the gift of life. It just shows you how important doing the right thing is, no matter what the repercussions are. During college at a house party, some random guy bumped into me and told me to frick off. I called him an ass and next thing I know he pulled out a knife and pointed it at me. I was freaking out internally but was able to maintain a face of calmness. I just shook my head at him and he walked away. I then sat down on the couch and started hyperventilating because holy shit he could have killed me. In 2016 I was addicted to Percocet and Benzos. I overdosed unintentionally. I flatlined in the ambulance. Thankfully I was revived. I could feel myself slipping away. That was the day I stopped using. The 23rd of March 2016. My dad and I were nearing the summit of the mountain we were climbing. But there was this low flying glider distracting me. You know how you get dizzy if you look straight up? Well, it almost made me fall. I worked at a moving company. I was by the loading dock getting something. The truck was backing up but it didn't have the reverse beeping function and my co-worker freaked out and yelled at the driver and threw a pebble at the window. The truck was about to crush me against the loading dock and didn't even notice. Dove in a lake off a boat chasing a crappy fishing float. I was around 6. No life vest. I was 50 feet from the boat in like 10 seconds. There was some sort of weird current that was fighting me from getting back to the boat. I remember completely giving up. I stopped swimming and started to sink. I was totally cool with it too. That was about the time my mom grabbed me and swam me back to the boat. I lacerated my spleen when I was 11. I hit a pothole on my bike and flew forward into the handlebars, which pushed up under my ribcage. I lost about 40% of my blood internally and went into shock just before being wheeled up to the OR. I was told that if I went another hour or two without surgery transfusion I'd probably have bled out. I remember this. The last day of my 3rd grade year. A friend of mine gathered all her friends in the class and decided to throw a pool party to celebrate the end of the year. Her parents laid back and decided to let her do it. Unfortunately there was somebody there who hated me, we'll call them K. And I don't know exactly why. We were playing tag inside the pool and I decided to go underwater to surprise the person I was targeting. I was underwater and K had a giant floaty, one of the ones that you lay on in the pool. She decided to put it over me when I was going up for air. I felt my head hit the back of the floaty while I was underwater. Being the usual me, I freaked out and didn't think about moving out of the way. I stayed there until one of the kids' parents saw me and came to get me. Kate told me it was a prank. She said to the parents it was an accident. I had to deal with her BS for the majority of my school life. Edit. Some of you are asking if I got revenge on her and where she is now. 1. I never really got revenge on her. Since back then most of the time she wasn't the most of my worries. Plus I was too scared to any of that. 2. I don't exactly know what happened to her. But I know that she never finished high school and she's still living with her parents. She was 17 when she dropped out. Standing on the running boards of a semi-truck looking for a place to jump while sliding backwards down a hill while ice road trucking in northern Ontario. Long story. But, caught in a riptide in the ocean in Mexico. Waves were slamming me to the bottom, where I'd scratch and claw to keep from being pulled further out. After a couple of cycles where I didn't get a breath before getting slammed again, I started to take water in. Exhausted. No breath. Started to legitimately consider giving up. I pictured my mother sitting on her couch, getting the phone call. It was like a dream, but crystal clear. I heard her get that call. Nope. Not gonna let that happen. Somehow changed my strategy. Get away from the rocks I was drifting toward first. Worry about shore second, and that seemed to make the difference. Crawled back onto the shore and have never been as reckless in the ocean since. There was one time I was on a 2-lane highway driving and there was a median in between each 2-lane sides. I was in the left of the 2 lanes passing someone, and after I passed them, I got back over to the right. As soon as I got back over to the right, a car going the opposite direction somehow sped by us in the lane that I was just in. If we had collided it would have been instant death for all of us involved. Was trying to start a campfire with gasoline. Stupid. I know. Some of it got on my pants without me noticing. So when I threw the match and the bottom half of my leg got set on fire. Luckily, my friend had some water and I stopped, dropped and rolled. Got drugged in a bar. Thrown out and ended up rolling around in the snow in about -10°C completely out of it for a couple of hours. Would probably have frozen to death unless my sister's ex-boyfriend found me and called my parents. I fell off a 4th-story balcony and was found by the groundskeeper the next after laying unconscious for 10 hours. Woke up in a hospital. When I was born the placenta detached. My parents weren't worrying too much when they saw a little blood, but my grandma freaked out and made them go to the hospital. They were told by the hospital that if they had gone to the hospital in the cities rather than the local one, I would have been stillborn and my mom may have died too from blood loss. So I was about an hour from never being alive to begin with. Edit. A sentence went haywire on me. Sorry if there are any mistakes, but English is not my first language. Anyway, it was at New Year's Eve 6 years ago and I can remember everything crystal clear. I was with my father and we were heading to some friends to celebrate the new year. Because my father knew he will get poop-faced drunk, we wanted to take a taxi. After about 20 minutes finally a taxi stopped for us. I was about to go in and in this moment my father just took me from my shirt and threw me 2 meters behind him and I was like WTFY. After I got up I just see that a car that was driving with about 100 km crashed into our taxi. Because I was going in at the back seat, if my father hadn't thrown me at the ground I would have fly from the impact and most probably I would have died on New Year's Eve. Yeah, that was my story again, sorry for any mistakes. BTW, this is my first Reddit post and I don't know how to do this LMAO. Edit 1. Thank you for 115 upvotes guys, it means a lot to me. Edit 2. OMG, thank you so much for 200 upvotes. driving too fast on a slightly wet road in a light drizzle. Hit a patch of water and started sliding all over the place. Like 180-degree back and forth. Vehicle perpendicular to the flow of traffic. I look through the passenger window and see an 18-wheeler coming at me about 50 yards away. And in those next few seconds is when I learned how to control a vehicle that is hydroplaning. Otherwise I wouldn't be here.
Hi there. Look, if you enjoyed the video, well, why not go ahead and hit that like and subscribe to Reddit Stories. In fact, if you want to see even more responses to this thread, well then, take a look. There's the link in the description below. And remember, show some love to those authors while you're there. And I look forward to seeing you next time.